Alright. So of course Holy Spirit's just been talking and a lot of times like I question why God has me here. I know I'm doing good. I know what I bring is helpful, but sometimes I still question it, you know? I think that's natural. And just recently, you know, just thinking about like, God, what more is there that I could share with them that would help? And because sometimes I feel like, how many are here for addiction? Is that okay for me to ask that? Okay. Um, I've never gone through addiction myself. Just throwing that out there. I'll be real honest about that. But what God initially told me before I came up here was that even though you yourself didn't walk in those shoes specifically, it's what's behind the addiction that you can relate to them with. Um, because usually what leads to addiction or to the thing that you would reach out to that for comfort or for whatever the situation is that you're reaching to that thing for that draws you away from God is usually there's trauma behind that decision. There's choices that we made that led us to that decision. There's pain that we're trying to cover up. There's things that we want to not think about anymore. And so we grab those certain things hoping that we can drown our sorrows and not have to think about the realities of our life or the experiences that we've gone through. And like God he always brings me back to that reminder that there's something so beautiful about the things that I went through because it is something that I can use to be able to help you guys and to help, I don't know who, you know, whoever comes in my path that needs it, I can give that encouragement, I can give hope because that's what I've gone through myself. And so coming here today, like my testimony today is so much different than what it was when I first came out and started talking to you guys. Because I see so much more of God in it than I did before. And I'm so grateful for where I am now and that I'm not where I was. And there's often times that I think about it and I'm like, man, to go back would just be a death sentence, I feel like, compared to what I have now. And not in literal terms, but emotionally, internally, like I felt so dead. Like I felt like there was no future for me. I felt like I was going to forever be that way. I was doomed to it, you know? And for those of you who don't know, like I come from a childhood well into my adulthood life where abuse, manipulation, betrayal, like all of the things, it just, I mean, from a very young age, that's what I had. That's what life gave me. And for a long time, like that was the only thing that I knew was where I came from. And I feel like I need to go a little bit deeper into that for somebody in here. A lot of you know already, but for those of you who don't, I'm just gonna let it go, let it flow. As a 6-year-old little girl, I was molested by my stepfather, my stepbrother, and then several family members who, there was incest, you know, different things that happened throughout my family. And that happened until I was 12. So for 6 years, that was my life. That was my upbringing. That was everything I ever knew. That's what I grew to know that's love, that's safety, that's like all of those things, and it's so wrong. But that was my foundation. And coming up out of that, once I spoke out about it, and I started to learn how wrong those things were, the betrayal set in. And then resentment, hate, anger, shame, grief, fear, all of those things, that was my foundation. It was all I knew. And going through life, I always held on to the hope that God was real. But I didn't really believe that he was because of the life that I had. And so with that, I reached out more to people, hoping that they would give me what everyone told me only God could give. And man, that'll set you up for a lot of heartbreak, a lot of disappointment, a lot of betrayal. So, I wanted so much to know what real love was like. I wanted so much to know what it was to be accepted as the real me. The me that didn't have to hide, that didn't have to pretend. The me that could be just whatever I needed to be for today. And it took me a long time to be able to do that. I had to go through a lot of stuff, a lot of hard stuff. Eventually, like whenever I was 12, I was forced to go live with my biological father. We did not have a good relationship. He was a very hard-hearted man. He didn't trust anybody but himself and his own thoughts and ways. And coming to him after everything coming out, I was literally rejected. Like, I was made to believe, he didn't believe me. He didn't believe me. 2 weeks after having to live with my dad, I get woken up in the night saying that my stepdad committed suicide. And my father, the way that he told me was, I really hope to God that what you're saying is true because this man just killed himself for you. And I took on a burden that was not mine to carry. I took on a responsibility that wasn't mine. I believed it. I believed it was my fault. And I regretted ever saying anything because I thought if I had never said anything, he would still be here. My family wouldn't have been ripped apart. My father wouldn't hate me. I felt like everything that was going on was my fault. And I thought that the hell that I was going through on my own was better than putting everybody else through it. And I lived with that for a long time. Like 20 plus years. I really did. And the crazy thing about it is that I couldn't trust myself, but it opened myself up to trust everybody else that I shouldn't have. If that makes sense. I wanted love so bad, and I wanted approval and acceptance. I wanted all of those things that I easily trusted people who did not have my best interest at heart. And so again, betrayal, heartbreak, disappointment, all over again. It was a constant something that kept happening, and I couldn't understand why it keeps happening. God, where are you? And isn't that what we do? We blame God for our choices, for our lack of understanding. We always blame God for it. I did. I really did. And I kept expecting God to come through, but at the same time, I kept taking it into my own hands and doing what was in my control to be able to gain the life and the love and the acceptance and those things that I wanted. And I would come to church and I would ask God for all of those things that I wanted from him. But then I would leave the church expecting it to come through somebody else. I didn't believe that God really loved me. I didn't believe that God really felt my pain. I didn't believe that God really saw the tears that I cried. I didn't believe any of it. I hoped that one day he would. And I'm going to tell you, the thing about hope is there's so much power to just hope. If it's the only thing you have left, I encourage you to cling to it. A couple weeks ago, I got up here and I was talking about how hope was the only thing that I had. And a part of me felt almost shamed in that, like, because I really didn't walk in faith. And I felt, I don't know how to explain it, but I felt heavy-hearted, I guess, because the only thing that I did have was hope. But at the same time, like I just said, hope was the only thing that kept me going. It kept me going. It kept me getting back up. And the strength that comes from the hope that I had, that even if it was wrong, thinking that God was somewhere far off waiting for me, like, it doesn't matter. It got me up and it kept me moving forward and searching for him and hoping that one day I would find him. And if that's where you're at today, you're not in a bad place. You're in a much better place than you would be without hope. I promise that. So eventually, I get married, and that relationship falls apart. I made choices, we made choices, we both hurt each other, and went our separate ways. And I'll tell you, you know what, I'm just going to be honest. The mistake that I made was that instead of just having the courage to say I didn't want this anymore, that I didn't want the way that life was in that relationship, I had an affair. And when I didn't get caught, I actually came out and told on myself because the guilt, to me, it was like my way out. But something that happened, and I'm a little embarrassed about it, but at the same time, it's so real. Like, spiritual warfare is real, guys. I remember the night that it came out, he started banging his head up against the wall. And I remember just dropping to the floor. And I look back and I'm like, oh man, it's so crazy. But it's real. I dropped to the floor and I just hold my hands to the side of my head and I just start screaming like a maniac. Because I hated so much the choice that I made because I saw the pain that it caused. I saw it. It didn't matter what he put me through, it wasn't right that I did that back. I knew that was a learning lesson for me that revenge is not the right way to do it. So I vowed to myself that I would never, ever repeat that one. I would never do it that way again. So anyway, we ended up divorcing, going our separate ways. We were separated for about 8 months or so, and I met Javier. And at first, whenever we first met, we were locked in. We were inseparable, literally, from the first date that we went on. And I remember opening up to him because he asked me, and I'm like sometimes stupidly honest. Like I literally wear my heart on my sleeve. You ask me, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. I'm going to tell you my truth. But not everybody is in the right heart set to, let me see how I can word this the correct way. Sometimes they will use your honesty as stones against you. They'll take what they can, and it's not just my husband that did this. This was a time in his life when he too was having troubles trusting and opening up, and he was not a God-fearing man at that time. And honestly, I wasn't either. I wanted to be. I wanted to be a Christian. I wanted the Christian life, but I didn't know how to make it. I didn't know how to get it. I didn't know how to be it. I'm just being real here. But anyway, so I trusted him with my entire story, from my childhood to my marriage that fell apart, and just that was enough for him to be like, okay, I want to do this. We can have a good life. We've both been through a lot of stuff. Like, there was a connection because we both come from such trauma and just toxic childhoods. And I believe that, so God's been really talking to me about this, and this is something that I'm going to have in my book. I know, okay, I'm just going to say it. Narcissism and an empath. When you put those two together, man, it really creates a toxic situation. Especially when the empath doesn't know how to navigate it. Or how to, is that the right word, navigate? I think it is. Because a narcissist, they manipulate, they confuse, they use what they can against you to try and get more of what they want, if that makes sense. If you've ever been in it, you know what I'm talking about. Man, it caused such a confusion within myself, because how can we be, in the beginning it was so much love. What I thought was love. It was everything good, everything I ever dreamed of, I finally had. But then the mask started to fall. It started to fall. But I had already seen the good man. I'd already seen the good man that he could be. And I kept trying to figure out what it was that I was doing wrong that would make him choose to be the way that he was being now. Because anything that didn't go right, it was my fault. So I kept trying in the best effort that I could to make it better, to fix it, because that's what I am. I'm a fixer. I really want to fix stuff. Especially people, broken people, hurting people. That's my desire. And I knew behind his anger that that's what that was. I knew that's what it was. I could see it. I just didn't know how to fix it. And I thought that fixing me would fix him. But that's not how it works, guys. You can't force people to want to get better. So this relationship, it went on this way for 8 years. 7.5, about 8 years, And during that time, we started, he was smoking marijuana, I started smoking marijuana. It developed into dabbling in cocaine, and then alcoholism, and then we were doing all three things at once, and then we would come back down, and we'd be like, okay, that's not the life for us. We're going to go to church, we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. And then something would happen, and we're right back to where we just promised we weren't going to go. And I'll be honest, I enabled a lot of it. I did. Because I thought that if I just rolled with him, that would get me the love and the acceptance and the trust that he needed for me to know that, hey, I'm with you. Be nice to me, love me, care for me like you did in the beginning. That's what I wanted. That protection that I felt in the beginning, And a lot of times whenever we would argue and we'd have our fights and stuff, it was over some really dumb little stuff, but it would evolve into this big something all the time. And it would always somehow come back around to my reaction. that I was wrong. And I'm so grateful that God has changed that man. I am such a believer in miracles because that man is a miracle man. What God has done in him is incredible. My father is still the same. I wish that my father, I pray so much that he can experience what my husband has. I wish he could because it's so freeing. And so going through all of that and whatnot, like we had our little girl at the time, and we were traveling on the road. I was coming back every couple of months or whatever and visiting my older two children, and you know, there were certain things that I would find that Javier was doing or thinking about doing or looking at or secrets that I wasn't supposed to know. And there for a little bit of time, I would call it out, but then it came back around into this big, huge blowout, and I was the one in the wrong. And I oftentimes came back to being the one to apologize for ever bringing it up. And it put me into this state of constantly feeling like I have to be on guard. I have to constantly, secretly be looking out for what's happening on the other side. I have to constantly be trying to literally like snoop and spy, but I couldn't say anything about it, about my findings, because it never did any good. And I'll tell you, that internally will put you, oh man, the silence that I felt like I had no voice anymore. I felt like my cares didn't matter. I felt like I was literally like a puppet. I was just there, existing, quietly in pain. It was torment. And that's what the enemy does. He'll let you go through these certain things with people who aren't quite there yet, if that makes sense. If you're being used by the enemy, you're a tool of the enemy. And he's going to target those who God has chosen. That's what he does. So you do have to guard your heart. You do have to guard your mind. You do have to be in the Word. You do have to do all of those certain things. You can be good to people. You can do all of the right things for people, but and those are good things, but that's not what's going to get you there. It's not what's going to protect you, if that makes sense. And eventually, man, it really came to a head whenever, like, I felt so silenced. There's actually a picture I drew of the silence that I really felt, and that was my first realization of really taking a deep look at how I really felt. Because all of my life, I've always focused on how I made other people feel. And I did that to stop myself from looking at how I really felt. Because I knew how I felt wasn't good. I was afraid to know exactly, like to take a look at myself. Has anyone else ever been there? Because it takes some real honesty to look at yourself and to understand where you really are and why you're there and why you feel the way that you feel. It takes a real honesty. And for me, I'll tell you, it was not easy. And then this desire within me started to grow that I knew from a young age that God was going to use my story. I knew that he was. And it wasn't until I trusted that he was going to that I started putting one foot forward and taking the steps to figure out how is God going to use my story. And I heard the calling that I was supposed to start writing. So I said, okay, I'm going to start writing my story. I was not ready. I was not ready. But you know what it did is it helped me to be able to start working through some things. Because whenever you have to start writing, that's whenever you can really get honest with yourself on paper. You don't have to talk the words out loud to anybody. You can put it on paper. You can erase it if you need to. You can go back. You can process it. You can reread it. You can process it again. And I'm so grateful that God led me to do that because it really helped. So then I started thinking about, okay, like, if this is going to be a book, what kind of story do I want it to be? Because my story could go several different ways. I could turn it into this dark, morbid kind of sort of thing, and I tried to write it that way, and I couldn't. I couldn't. So I would start by trying to tell the story of exactly how it started. Exactly how my life started from the time I was 6 years old. And then I went back a little bit further to before that trauma happened at 6 years old. What was my life before that happened? My life before that was all I could remember was my mother and my father always fighting. I remember never loving my father, even from way little. My father never loved me. I can't say that he never loved me. I don't know, but he loved me in a way that was not the way a father should love a child. And I remember being so scared as a little girl that my parents, they were outside in the hallway, just outside my bedroom door. And I was so terrified to come out because I just saw from under the door, I saw my father push my mom's head into the wall. I remember needing to go to the bathroom, that I was so terrified to come out that I found a little corner in my bedroom and did my business there because I was so scared to come out of my room. And every time I tried to start somewhere better, I couldn't find it. Where is God? Where is better? How do you go back any further than what you can really remember? Pastor and Tamara, they both really helped me through some things, and I don't think that they know how much they really helped me just by the conversations, just by the little things that they would say. Tamara told me once, she's like, you just have to go back to the beginning. And I'm like, okay, what is my beginning? I was born into this literal shit life, I felt like. And so I really started to go back even further, before I was born. And sometimes that's where you gotta take it. It was for me. When I took it back there, I was able to start where God was. I literally saw God forming me before he put me in my mother's womb. And sometimes that's where you gotta go back to, where you originally came from. And then I started thinking about the life of Jesus whenever he was born onto the earth. Just like us, we were born to a mother and father, and then life happened. Life happened, right? What did Jesus do to deserve the things that he got in life? Nothing, right? He didn't deserve what people put him through. Just like I didn't deserve what people put me through. And the more that I started finding relation to what Jesus walked through on earth, the easier it came for me to be able to see that he does understand me, because he himself was walking himself. And nobody faced a greater betrayal than me. Nobody. was talking about the character. That your character doesn't change. The character of God stays the same forever and ever. It never changes. And if God is who he's always been, I know I can trust that. And that's where it started. I started believing that I could trust God. And since then, my things have just, man, my relationship with God has grown deeper. I'm so grateful. So along the way, I started having these visions. Back in 2020, when COVID hit, me and Javi, we got into this big altercation because I found something, I called it out, and it blew up into this big ordeal, and it scared him. I no longer believed that I was safe. So he left for work one morning, and as soon as he left, I packed up me and my little girl stuff before what I could fit in the car, and I left. And I get a call after he gets off of work, and he's begging me to come back. And I told him, no, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back. So I go and this family that I go to stay with, she's like my spiritual mother. So I went to Teen Challenge for a little while, if you guys know what that is. It's kind of very similar to this program, but a little different. So I had known this woman for like 12 years, something like that. Maybe 8 whenever I first, anyway, knew her for quite some time. And she has always been my rock that I knew I could come back to. It was my safe place. It was she was there to pick me up every time, every single time. Even if it was just a word of encouragement that I needed, she was there. And I remember laying in the bathroom floor, like I just gotten off the phone with Javier. We're trying to work through our stuff. We're trying to talk through it, and all he could do was just get angry at me and not understand. And to him, he was a victim. You know, he thought that I did him so dirty, and maybe I did, but there was no talking to him at that time. He couldn't talk through things. So I find myself getting off the phone, and I just feel so defeated. And I'm at this crossroad where I don't know what to do. Either way, if I go back or if I don't, I feel scared. I feel scared because I know a little bit about this man's past, and it's enough to know that it could possibly not be saved. You know what I mean? I felt like I was going to have to be afraid no matter which way I went. So I outweighed my options. First, I'll tell you, I was on the floor just sobbing because I felt so defeated. And my heart was completely torn because I really loved this man, and I believed that he loved me too. I just didn't believe that he knew how. And a lot of that came also because I didn't feel like I made it very easy. Because honestly, I didn't know how to love myself either. I didn't know what I really needed to really know that I was loved. I didn't know. I didn't know what that looked like. And there on that bathroom floor, I had my first vision. And I've shared it with a few of you guys. It was the vision of me as a little girl, clothed in a dress that was way too big for me. It was more like a robe. And I see myself running ahead, but I'm looking behind me, tears streaming down my face, and I can feel the fear in this vision. Like I can feel I'm so afraid. And when I see what I'm running away from, it's this big black ball. And it terrifies me. And it was like, but then whenever I saw what I was running to, it was Jesus ahead of me with his arms wide open, just calling me. Just come. Just keep coming. And what it meant to me then was, no matter what you're afraid of, just keep coming. Just keep coming. And that to me was like, you know what, I don't need to be afraid. And I also believe that God wasn't in favor of divorce, and I still believe he's not in favor of divorce, but he's also not in favor of his children suffering. And he's not in favor of one having to stay in a relationship that isn't safe, that isn't both of you serving God. And, but I chose that, you know what, I'm going to go back because I wanted to fix this. I believed it was the right thing to do, and he had never hurt me like I had ever been hurt before, if that makes sense. So to me, I told myself, I'm not in the danger that, like, because when you come from a life, like a childhood where it's that kind of abuse, you'll be able to take things that are abusive and not make it such a big deal because you've already been through, to me, the worst of the worst. And he never laid a hand on me. Never laid a hand on me. But just the thought of a fist being raised is scary. It's scary. And I'm sorry to those of you who have ever experienced abuse beyond that. I know the fear of it just possibly happening, and I can't imagine what it feels like to really have that happen. I'm sorry if that's you. So I go back, and we kind of pretend like nothing ever happened. And I'll tell you, I was terrified because I didn't know what was going to happen. And I also knew my husband to be a very vengeful man. I saw it, with other people. So I came back, and I was terrified because I didn't know what I was really walking back into. And but when I came back, like everything was just kind of like, hey, I'm glad you're back, like things are good. And then it just like, everything just kind of went back to normal. We both started smoking our marijuana and just drowning things out and pretending like we're good. And it was good for a while. And then I ended up getting pregnant with Mr. Silas. And gave birth to that little guy in an RV on my own. I was like, yeah, I did. Yeah, it was. Samelia was there to help me. She was really tiny, but she did. You remember that? Yeah. When Silas was born. Mm-hmm. And Javier showed up just right after I gave birth to him, and he couldn't believe it. I mean, he was in shock, but before he did anything, he took a picture, so we've got proof. And anyway, so life was good. Like we felt like we were on a good track, like things were good. Things were moving the way that we needed them to. And then something happened with his work situation, and he ended up, I don't remember if he got laid off or he quit that job. I don't remember. I know he does, but I don't. Something happened where we found ourselves in a situation, and he was either going to go on to the next job. We were going to maybe take some time off for a little bit, go visit some family. We didn't really know which way we were going to go. Shortly after Silas was born, he came down with fever, like the day after he was born. He came down with a super high fever. And we ended up taking him to the emergency room, and they did a spinal tap and told us that this boy had, let me get it right, I always say it wrong. Meningitis? Yeah. Spinal meningitis or something like that. Very life-threatening situation. And they put us in isolation in a room, and I I fasted and I prayed for God to save my baby. And there was no other symptoms. All he had was the fever. So I was telling them, like it didn't develop into anything more. Well, they came in the room and they were talking to me and they were like, we want to do another spinal tap. And I said, no. I said, you can look at that boy and tell that that's not necessary. I said, is there any way that we can get around that? Can you guys retest the original sample? Is there something else that you can do before we put him through that again? And they said, yeah, I think we can. So they go back and they test that original sample that they got. And it came back clear. Yeah. And that was the first time I believed that God really does miracles. He really does. How can, and the doctors, they were baffled. They couldn't believe it. They said, I just don't understand how anything could get cross-contaminated. Like, they questioned that, and they're like, there's no way. We were so careful with this type of situation. How could that be? And I looked at that doctor square in the face, and I told him, it's God. I said, it's God. My little boy, you see him today, that stuff did nothing to him. It didn't touch him. And after that situation, me and Javier, we decided that we're going to go ahead and just take some time and go to his sister's house and help her out with a few things and just take a little time and try and decide what we need to do next. Where is life going to take us next? So we did. We go to his sister's and we're sitting there talking and he says, you know what, I think it's time that we settle down. And I'm like, okay, where do you want to settle down? And we think about Florida because we both really love our time in Florida. We love the weather, we love the atmosphere, we love all of it. Except I was scared to run because of what happened in Florida. There were some bad things that happened in Florida. An old man tried to chase me down whenever I went for a run because my dog got loose on his leash. And their dogs kind of, like his dog and my dog had a little altercation. This man tried to run me down with a metal rod. Yeah, it was crazy. And anyhow, we'll stop that. I've been through a lot. After that, I was terrified to get out of the house, like to go and run or to go and do anything. I was scared. And anyway, so we decided, you know what, I told her and I said, I really need to go back and be with my two older kids. Because I can't tell you, man, the tears that I cried because of the choice that I made to leave them. And it was circumstantial. I didn't believe that my circumstances were, like, it just wasn't a good situation. But I also wasn't allowed to take them with me. So it was kind of like a choice that I made, and maybe it was a little selfish, but at the same time, I knew that their dad cared very much about them and that he was going to take good care of them. I knew that. And so, but there was still so much guilt, a lot of guilt from that one, because these were my babies, you know? And I walked. There's still some good to work on, isn't there? It's hard to admit some truths, right? So, you guys can imagine what that was like being away, if you can see it like it is now. I cried all the time. I wanted to be a mom, that's what I felt like. I was good at it. I was good at being a mom. And I mourned it. So I told Javier, I said, you know, I was never going to go home. I want to be a mom with my kids, to all of my kids. for the house. I told you guys a little bit about the house and how we found it and stuff, and how we came back to Coffeeville. Well, you don't, but it's pretty awesome what God could do. So we come back and things are good. Like, we're so grateful. Like, God gave us, like, literally, He put this house in our hands. He made a way for us to be able to financially afford it. We were happy. My husband got a job. It was local. Things were going really good. And then something at his workplace happened. And it spun him back into a dark place. He witnessed a man fall to his death at work. And he was the first one on scene to try and assist. And I don't know what that's like, but I saw what it did to him. The workplace didn't provide any counseling or any assistance in trying to help with that mental state, because a lot of people just don't understand that the way that it affects a person to witness something like that. It's traumatic. And he did, he used it as an excuse to turn back and to pick up the drink and try to drown it out. But all it did was drown him deeper. And then it developed into the cocaine use. And then we're smoking marijuana all the time. Honestly, during that time, I never quit smoking marijuana. It was just what helped me cope. That's what I used to do. Because it put me in the state of mind that everything is good, And whenever I would come down off of the high, it's like the reality. Everything that from my past that I carried, that I kept focusing on, that I kept looking at, it was right there waiting for me when I came down. So I constantly stayed in the state of being high. And it also helped me I say it helped me, but it didn't really help me, but I don't know what other word to use. It helped me to put my energy where it needed to be, and that was my kids. To want to get out of bed and to go and take my daughter to the park and put on a happy face and be what I desired to be for her. But at the same time, all my kids could see it. My oldest daughter, Farrah, I would love for you guys to really get to know her, but she's very shy. But she'll tell me, she's like, man, Mom, you used to be so sad. She's like, even when you smiled, you could see how sad. Breaks my heart. But at the same time, I'm glad that she can witness that there's a comeback. Because she sees who I am now and she can compare it to who I used to be, and that assures her that her too can come back. And so Javier ended up in this downward spiral, and I couldn't figure out how to fix it. I didn't know how to help him. He pretty much shut down and pushed me away. And the more I tried to help, the more he pushed away. He didn't want my help. He just wanted me to be quiet and give him the support that he needed and meet the demands that he had, and that was it. But I wasn't okay with that. I needed more. I needed to feel like an equal. And then the hardship came where cancer tried to attack my body. And it devastated. Not because I was afraid of death, but because I hadn't really lived it. 30 years I've been on this earth and I haven't done a damn thing to sit here and cry my life away. And I hated that. I hated that I wasted so much in my life. Like, what good did I bring my kids? What good things have I taught them? I started thinking about all of these different things that I should have done. God told me he was going to use my story, and now here I am on that story. And I just remember I broke down and I told God, like, God, please, if you give me another chance, I'll use it for what you say. I'll do what you tell me to do. I want to make a difference in this world. I want people to have a hope that I carry. And it put this deep desire within me to do something good. So I started, me and Javier, my whole world at that time, I felt like was falling completely apart. I had all these worries, if that happens, what's going to happen to my kids? What kind of woman is going to be raising my children? Where's their dad going to be? What kind of mental state are my kids going to have to grow up in? All of those worries, I didn't want that. I didn't want that. And I'll tell you that while Javier was going through his thing, I was going through mine. And I remember him walking in that next morning after I got the diagnosis that I was supposed to be walking the treadmill. And he walks in and I'm laying on the treadmill just crying. Just silently crying, because I'm having this private conversation with God. And I remember Javier trying to encourage me. It was more harsh than it was encouraging. But he said, get up, babe. He's like, we can't, me and the kids need you. We need you. You've always been our rock. We need you to get up and stop this nonsense. And he meant well. I really do believe he meant well, but to me it was just so selfish. Here I am, being told that if I don't get this taken care of, I could possibly literally die. And you want me to get up and encourage you to have a good day? Excuse me. And that was the first time that I really believed that I was in it alone. That I had to be my rock. No matter how much I wanted him to be what I needed in that moment, if somebody isn't ready to be that, you can't force them to be. So what was I going to do? Who was I going to turn to? Everybody that had supported me before had already cut me off because I had drained their energy. And what it did was push me more toward God. It really did, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for it because it pushed me to the best place I could have ever been. It gave me a lot more than I ever knew I needed. And he ended up going on to a different job that was in Texas. And I ended up going and I had the surgery and thank God, they were able to remove it all completely, and I'm still good. Praise God for all of that. Give me another chance. And here I am doing what I promised. So much. So there's more that I have to do. Always. But when Javier left to go to Texas, it was the separation. I hated it, but at the same time, it was so necessary. It gave him the space to do whatever he was doing, and I didn't have, me and my kids didn't have to witness it at that time. And at the same time, it gave me an opportunity to be alone with God. Every morning, I got up, no matter how I felt. Sometimes it was 1 o'clock in the morning, sometimes it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and it didn't matter how long I was in there. As long as my kids were sleeping, I was in there. And by in there, I mean in a room by myself, just pouring my heart out to God. And that was the first time I had ever really done that. Because the only prayers I had ever prayed before were circumstantial. I wanted him to change my circumstances. I wanted him to change the people that were in my circumstances. I wanted him to do all of these different things, but I wasn't willing to do anything on my part. To be honest, like, that wasn't for myself, if that makes sense. All the good that I did was in hopes that I could get good for myself. And during that time, like, God really started speaking through visions, and it really helped me to, and I will tell you, when God gave me these visions, it was to help me through what I was going through. It helped me to see him where I couldn't see him before. It helped me to face the pain, but not have to face it alone. And whenever I had these visions, like, it wasn't like God just struck me and said, here, see this. Like, it was like I put myself in a position to hear. I prayed with the intention that God was going to speak. And at the same time, the enemy will scream so loud when you're trying to hear God. Anybody ever have that happen? When you're in worship and all you can start thinking about is all the bad things, all of the shame, all of the guilt, all of the things that are going wrong in life in the moment, or where the past is, and you just can't see the future when you sit down and you're praying. I was stuck in that for a long time, and I would get into that. I would get into it every single time. But this time it was different. I told myself no. Because I heard this thing, this one guy, he said that, well, actually, I believe Pastor says it all the time, if it's not good, it ain't God. And I believed it. I clung to it. So I would turn my thoughts back to God. And I started, the things that I would listen to were God-filled. I listened to sermons while I worked out instead of rock music and those type of things. Because I was so hungry to hear from God. I needed to hear from God. And once I heard from him one time, I wanted to hear from him every time. But it's where you tune your attention to that you're going to be able to hear. And the voice that you're going to hear. So I have an aunt that is schizophrenic. She's in a home. And I remember as a little girl hearing for the first time what gave her that diagnosis, and it was so scary. I remember I was pretending like I was asleep in the back seat of the car, and her and my mom were in the front seat, and they were talking, and I heard her tell my mom that she said, I'm possessed. She said, all I see is dead people. And she said that she would literally wake up and feel next to her a dead, like she could see dead. It was so real to her. And that really freaked me out as a kid. My family was like, this is cool. And, but I'll tell you, during this spiritual warfare that I was going through, I actually thought, like, many times I thought about her. And the enemy tried to convince me that that was me. That that's where I was headed. I really thought I was going crazy. And so much of it I literally had to turn my thoughts away from that and trust where God was taking me. I had to trust the good that I heard over the bad. And do you know how scary that is when all you've ever heard and all you've ever been able to trust is the bad? Because that's all you've ever experienced. It is so scary to trust good when good comes around. And I ended up going to Texas to visit Javier. I took the kids up there. We had a good couple of days. And then it was the 4th of July. We had shot off some fireworks. I left them out in the parking lot until he came home the next day. And when he got home, they were still out there scattered. I didn't clean up. I just left them there. He had drank some beers. I left those there too. I didn't care to clean up. I mean, it's whatever, you know? And it made him angry because everybody from his workplace could drive by the RV park and see the mess in our RV yard. Ridiculous, right? Those were our kind of fights, and it would just escalate. And it was just so stupid. And at that moment, I was just fed up. I was like, this is so ridiculous.
Okay, let's switch mics.
And then, anyway, so we got into this big fight, and I ended up just taking the kids to the park. I said, I'm just going to go to the park for a little while. We go to the park, and he calls me after about 30 minutes or so, and he's like, are you coming back? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be there when I'm there. And then I get back, and again, we ended up trying to talk it through, and it ended up escalating into this big ordeal, and I finally threw my hands up. I said, I'm done. I am not doing this anymore. I said, I'm going home, and that's it. I'm not coming back. And he was like, good, go then, stupid fight stuff. And I ended up packing up my stuff and came home. And I think he believed that everything was going to be fine, but it really wasn't fine. I had finally just had enough. I didn't want to fight. I wanted peace. I wanted freedom from the constant worry and stress and constantly feeling like I have to prove myself and it never being enough no matter what I did. I was exhausted. It literally, man, I can't tell you the health, it took over my health, it took over my mental health, it drained me completely. I went from a healthy 145 pounds down to 119 in very little time. I was sick. I couldn't keep food down. My hair was falling out. I was a mess. And so I started, rather than just letting myself fall apart like I always had before, and then waiting for to go back to doing it the same, I kept every morning just getting up and pouring my heart out to God and waiting for God to speak. And in that room, at the same time, I knew I needed to get into church. So I started church hopping, I guess you could say. And before I would go, I would pray every single time that this would be the church, and God, if it's not, let me know. Signs and wonders, He'll give them to you. I ended up going to several different churches, and I just knew they weren't for me. And I went to this one specific one, and it was this, in the privacy of my own home, talking to God, I begged Him to give me my voice back, to give me the courage to speak and the courage to not be so afraid to share my story and what I had been through and to lead me to good, And I went to church and I prayed, that this was going to be our church. And if it is, God, show me. If it's not, show me. And I go in and I'm feeling really good about it. The pastor's preaching good. And he calls for an altar call at the end of it. And I felt very much the urge to go to the altar. So I go to the altar and I'm down on my face and I start out loud crying out. And that was the first time I had ever done that. Every other time I ever prayed, it was silent, especially in front of people. It was silent, but this was the first time, and I felt I felt so much that this was God giving me my voice back. The Holy Spirit he was there. And in the middle of that moment, I feel a tap on my shoulder. And then I hear this man whisper, Michaela, it was really good having you here. If there's anything we can do for you, we'd sure love to have a conversation. And I was like, okay. And I had seen altar calls many times. I had gone up and I've received prayer. And this time it was different. For one, not one hand touched me while the Holy Spirit and I were having that encounter. So I knew, like, God let me know in that moment that it was me and him. And I didn't have to depend on somebody else for him to come through to me. Just him. It was the first time I experienced that without someone else being involved. And I'm not saying not to let people lay hands on you, but all I am saying is that that's not, like, God will do it for you through him. And you'll know it's him because it's powerful. And whenever that man interrupted that encounter, I immediately felt embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, like, was I, because like I said, that was my first time ever letting that happen, and not being embarrassed about who saw or who witnessed or what I was saying or what I sounded like I didn't care. And I remember going back to my chair and just I was embarrassed. Like, I couldn't get out of there fast enough, to be honest. So come to find out, he interrupted the service, or he interrupted that experience that I was having because they were having a flag hanging ceremony after church, and he didn't want the time to go over and bleed over into that because, I mean, everybody's schedules, you know? Once I heard that, I got to my car and I was angry. I was angry because I felt embarrassed. And I was angry because that moment to me was so real, and I felt like God was finally giving me back something that I had lost. And that man's going to interrupt that time. I was angry. And I'm telling you, I told myself, like, I'm going to go back in there. I'm going to tell him exactly what he did. And I got one foot out of my car door, and Holy Spirit was like, don't go back in there. And because for me, that was a learning moment for me. And sometimes I think about going back and visiting with that pastor and just sharing with him that experience, because not because I'm angry about it, I'm no longer angry about it, but to make him aware of the Holy Spirit and what that looks like, because I don't know if he really knows what that is. So anyway, I decide that is not my church. I will not go back there. And I end up getting a job at a daycare with a lady who knew me from when I lived with my dad. I was in middle school, high school. And she was the owner of this daycare. And I went there with the intention that this is going to be like, I'm trying to figure out where God wants me to be, where I can be of good service to people, where I can, where does God want me to be? So, and ultimately, I did not last more than 3 weeks in that daycare. It was so chaotic. But God put me in that place because of that woman. I shared with this woman because she knew a little bit about my upbringing, kind of where I came from. And I shared with her my situation that I was in that moment with Javier. And I had the divorce papers in hand. I was ready to go and turn them in. I was going to go to the library and fax them off. And she told me, she's like, Michaela, there's just somebody you need to meet. Before you do that, I highly encourage you. And then she told me, she's like, God hates divorce and blah, blah, blah. And I say blah, 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 blah because now I have different beliefs about that. One thing I will say is if you're in that situation, I'm not going to tell you to stay, but I'm also going to say that give God a chance, an honest chance. Because what I did was, and I had to really take a deep look at my situation. Was it really what I thought it was, or was it the fear that drove me to make it bigger than what it was? Or was it because it was like this mixture of, I would blow it up because I was so afraid, but then I would calm myself down by making it appear like it's not that big of a deal, when really it's a big deal, but it's not so big of a deal that God can't, if we're both willing, and I give it that honest chance for both of us to do the right thing, and we're both actively choosing to turn our life around and being honest about that, and you'll be able to tell. But anyway, I got the job, and then this lady led me to Tamara, and Tamara led me to here. And I got here. I struggled to get here, but I got here. And I got here, and I sat over there. I don't remember what was being preached about. All I remember is just literally losing control of holding back any tears. I just sobbed. I sat over there and I just cried. And I wanted so much for my life to go a different way. I didn't want to be going through a second divorce. I didn't want to be without Javier. I really loved this man. And I really wanted him to choose to get better. I desperately wanted it. But that day, it was less about him and more about myself, something I had never done before. I had never cared about really where I was. It was always about other people and trying to make sure that everybody else was good. And I was okay with that because I care. I deeply care. But what made it dangerous is not caring about myself the same. And that day came, and finally it was like something just broke in me. It just broke in me, and I was like, man, like I was honest with myself, I am so broken. I didn't know how it was going to get better. And she asked me, like I sat over there, and at the end of service, pastor called for an altar call. I sat my butt down so fast, I was like, I'm not doing that again. Because I had just went through something, and what happened there, right? And then I said, I am a mess. I am not going up there like this. So I sit down, and I'm trying to clean myself up. And then she looks at me, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm ready. Like, what harm is it to go up and get prayed for? There's never been harm in that. So I made my way up here. And while I'm up here, I just remember them praying over me, and I just felt it in my spirit to lift my hands. And the words that came out was just, I'm sorry, God. I'm sorry. And that's all I could say was, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And originally I couldn't remember or like what I was thinking about, like what am I sorry for? And I've been reflecting back on that moment. And I believe that what I was sorry for is for taking so long. I was sorry for not giving him a chance forever ago. And I don't know why God did it for me, but I'm so grateful that he did. But that was the day that he delivered me from a lifetime of torment. And it was because I was truly ready. I finally realized that I don't have the strength to keep doing it the way that I was. I realized I didn't have any more strategy left. There was nothing more that I could do besides give up. Give up and let God. And I'll tell you, like, the visions that I had, like, he walked me through forgiveness because there was so much from my childhood that I had to walk through because I had always said that I forgave, but I never forgave how it made me feel. I never forgave what I took from what happened. I resented it all, and then I carried it like it was my own fault, as if there was something that I could have done different to prevent it all from happening. But I didn't choose it. I didn't go out of my way to make those things happen to me, right? And one vision that I had recently, it was more recent. It was this last Easter. I saw myself like a bird, a raven, in a bird cage. I was trapped in this bird cage. And I see myself start, like I walk up to the bars and I'm banging my head against these bars. And I remember just feeling so defeated, like in the vision, I could see it. Like when God gives you a vision, you can know it's God because you'll feel it. Like you'll be able to feel it as if it's like real. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but when you know, you know. But I saw myself walking up to this cage and banging my head against the walls. And that's how I felt before deliverance. I very much felt like that. I felt very trapped. I felt like I was, like there was, like, and it was a mental trap. I couldn't move off of where I had come from. I couldn't move off of everything that I had been through, everything that happened. I mean, it just packed on, and that was everything I reflected back on. And whenever I think about that first vision that I had, where I was looking back at my past and what I was afraid of, I believe that was God calling me away from fear. I believe that it gave me an honest look at, and it really validated me because I was very good about not even thinking about how, like, what feelings I'm really feeling, if that makes sense. Like processing them and trying to understand what is it that I really feel. All I knew is I was broken and I was very much afraid. And that's whenever I believe it was more a warning from God that fear is a spirit. And I lived in it. Hey, buddy. She probably, you want to say hi? No? Okay. But, anyway, I'll try not to keep you guys too much longer. I've been way over. Is that okay? Okay. But whenever I think back to that first vision that I ever had, and what it means to me now is like I see through my journey of growing with God how every time I go back to that, I find a new revelation to it. There's like different revelations for each period that I've gone through, and I'm just so grateful for it. But whenever I hear PD get up here and I hear him preaching, I'm like, yes, because it validates everything that I have believed, everything that God showed me. Like, and I'm like, okay. Like when I hear it from somebody else, I'm like, okay, there it is. So it's not just me. And but our mind's perception, what we think about, man, it can really jack us up with the things that we go through, right? Those things that I went through as a child, like it set me up for a really long, hard road. And it was all because I saw God as this fable, to be honest. The Bible was just a bunch of stories to me. Just being real. But now, whenever I go back and I read the Word, I find truth. Because that deliverance, in that one moment, in that deliverance that I had, I learned so much about God in that moment. I learned so much about who He is and the power that of what He can do. When I got up, actually, I want to tell you what it was like in that moment. It was the first time I ever really witnessed spirits. And it was the first time that I understood that feelings are spiritual. Because I saw, and it was like, I don't know how long I was down there. I think it was like 20, 30 minutes or so. It was a while, right? I had a lot to work through. God had a lot of cleaning to do, but he did. And I'm a very stubborn person, I will say. I'm very stubborn, so it takes me a minute. But every period, like I was yelling out these ugly yells, like, but I could feel what they were. Like there was, when it was frustration leaving, I could feel the frustration. And then it would go out, and I would get quiet for a minute, and they would just keep praying. And then it was like, okay, then the next thing came out. Anger, I could feel it. I remember just, like, man, I could feel it. But I could also feel it leave. And when it came time for fear, it was a big one. It was a big one. I was very much afraid of everything. And that one, I will tell you, like, I literally saw fear itself separate itself from me. And it started screaming, like I was like face to face. And it's so crazy in this moment. It sounds so chaotic. And it was like I was watching it, but it was still a part of something I was going through. There was such a peace that came over me that I was watching this warfare happen, and I didn't have to do anything but just let it happen and choose what I was going to listen to. Was I going to listen to fear screaming out at me that I was making everybody in the room afraid? That I heard it tell me, like, you've completely lost your mind. You need to get up, stop acting a fool. You're scaring everybody. Like, I heard all of these things, but it was like just peace. The more that I felt peace, the more I said no to the chaos. And the more peace I got. And that literally was me receiving the Holy Spirit. It was me receiving God. It was me accepting him and not letting the enemy have any more control over me. And I'll tell you, the moment that fear left, it was done. And I stood up, and I had never felt so light in my own body. I felt free. I knew in my mind I was different. Like all of the torment that I went through, I just knew it was different. But then I went on to test that. I left here, I knew I was different, but my situation was still the same. When I went home, it was still the same. We were still going through it. He ended up coming home, I think it was maybe a week after deliverance. And he came home, and we wanted to have a conversation, so I picked marijuana back up. I had been sober. Now, before deliverance, I do want to make this very clear. Before deliverance happened, I was already sober for 3 months. I had quit completely. I sobered up, and I told myself I'm not doing that because something happened months before that whenever I was doing cocaine, alcohol, and marijuana all at the same time, I had no clear mind. I couldn't make sense. To this day, I don't know what was real and what wasn't in that moment, and it changed my life. It made me never want to go back to doing that because I wanted to always be conscious. This was the first time I knew what it was to have a clear mind now, and I wanted that. But he came home, and we were driving. Yes, we were driving. I shouldn't say that, but we were. And he asked me if I would smoke with him, and I'm like, well, okay, I knew God. I knew that God wasn't going to strike me dead. I didn't have to be afraid of that. I knew that he would forgive me, and I'm still new to this, and this is what I mean by testing the waters. I'm testing was that really real, or was that really me just literally losing my mind? What was that? But we spark it up, and we're talking, and we have a really good conversation, and I ended up smoking for maybe a month or so. I have it written, well, I had it written on the wall. And I took pictures, so I have record. But anyway, and then we ended up going to a friend's house and started to party a little bit. And then I snorted a couple times. And I remember looking in the mirror this time, and I heard the Holy Spirit say, "This isn't for you. You're fixing to go down a really hard road that you don't have to go down." And I remember like my life like flashing before my eyes type of situation where I saw my future, like my kids being taken away from me, us losing different things. Like I saw a future that I didn't have to have, but it was my choice. So I took that little baggie that I had and I flushed every bit of it, and I said, "Okay, God," I said, "I choose you." And Javier was still doing his thing. We were so on different opposite ends of the spectrum, like of where we really, really, really desired to be. I believe he desired it, but he didn't feel, I know he felt the same way that I did. Shame, like we weren't good enough to have that kind of a life, being very much stuck in that mental state of mind that we'll never be able to move past what we've been through. And we ended up, I pretty much, like, things came to a head, something happened, I called it out, it escalated to beyond what it should have, and I ended up telling him, like, he needed to leave. So he packed up his stuff and took a job in Parsons, and he lived in Parsons while I stayed at the home with the kids and stuff. And I refused to take it back. We go to pastor, and that was the first time, like, I, to his face, had to tell him, "I don't want this." And pastor asked me whenever we were in that conversation, all three of us together, he was like, "Michaela, what do you want?" And I said, "I just want him to get the help that he needs so that we can be the family that loves God, that wants a life for God, and that doesn't want to go back. I don't want to go back. No more." I'd cut up the marijuana card, and because, like I said, like, I had a marijuana card, and that helped enable him also. And I made the decision, like, I'm not getting it anymore. And that really made him made him really unhappy. And I refused. I refused to go anywhere. I didn't want to get it. I wouldn't pull the money out of the bank. I was not giving in to that anymore. And I told him, if you want that life, you're going to have to go find it yourself. And he ended up, after we met with pastor, he was really angry. And he actually told me a few days ago, actually it was probably a couple weeks ago, he told me, he's like, "Man, Michaela," he's like, "I really wanted to hurt you." I was like, "I know you did." And then I said, I appreciate that you didn't. And he was like, "But you know what? Something came over me in that moment." He said, "I took my ring off and I threw it across the room," and he said, "and I just broke." He said, "I realized what was really happening and that this was really real." And he said, "And I feared for the first time that you were really done." I said, "I was." I meant it, and he knew it. And then he started coming to church. He might have still been getting high, but he was coming to church. And let me tell you, even in the moment, like in the middle of doing cocaine or in the middle of getting high or whatever, God is right there. He's right there. You can't tell me God doesn't speak to sinners. He's right there. I witnessed it. My husband's witnessed it. I'm sure you guys have too, if you really sit back and you think about it. Because those thoughts that you had in that moment, that were telling you that this isn't for you, that there's a better life, and that was God. I really, truly, 100% believe that that was God, Holy Spirit, talking to you, trying to call you out of the choices that you're making. So I get this job, and then it ends up opening a whole nother door for me. I ended up going to massage therapy, which I had a license for, or certification, and I started taking these different steps that I believed Holy Spirit was telling me to take. And I knew that no matter which direction, and people were trying to guide me like, oh, you can do this, you can do this. And I'm like, no, God says I need to do this. This is what I'm going to do. And I stayed very obedient to that as much as I knew how. And when you are trying to be obedient to every step that God gives you, you have to stay in connection with Him in order to get from one step to the next. You have to stay in connection, in relationship, listening and talking, but mostly listening for the next step, because God is a very strategic God. And I learned that. And by being obedient in this step, I was able to get to the next one. And at the same time, God was also flipping tables in Javi. And now we both are 100% sober. No alcohol, no marijuana, nothing, no dabbles, no desire. Like I don't even desire it. I don't want it. Sometimes it tries to come back and I'm like, oh, heck no. I have to be careful what I say. My son copied me this morning. Anyway, but every day that you get up, you have to choose what you're going to think on. Every day that I woke up, trauma plagued me. It did. It was literal torment every single morning. I opened my eyes every time I laid down at night to go to bed. Anytime I thought about life in general, it was always at what was. And it kept me bound. And in that vision I had of me in the bird cage, I saw the key of forgiveness inside the hole, and it flung open. And for the first time, it was like me understanding that that's my way to freedom. That's my way to freedom outside of this torment is through forgiveness. It opened the door and gave me opportunity. Now, as this bird in this cage, I saw myself walk to the edge of this cage and to the opening of that door. And I remember looking down and peering out and seeing nothing but clear skies.